Hello and welcome to this very special show where we're gathered to discuss whether sustainable development is a major factor in corporate strategic planning and whether corporates are incorporating green thinking in their strategic planning as well as the need for it. Before taking off, let me introduce our esteemed panel. We have Nazeeb Arif, Vice President and Chief of Corporate Communications at ITC. We also have Paul Abraham, the CEO of IndusInd Bank, Chaitanya Kalia, Partner of Planet Change and Sustainability at Ernst & Young, and of course Gurdeep Singh Anand, the Chairman and Founder of Universal Business School. And joining us live from Pune, we have MS Unikrishnan, MD at Thermax, joining us from the Thermax headquarters. Thank you, gentlemen, for joining us on the show. Now, let me just put it straight, before getting into the discussion. Sustainable development in India today is also about development in the field of social sector, clean tech, which includes water management, agriculture, as well as renewable energy, and as well as human resource segments. So it encompasses all of this. It's not just a CSR activity, and it has caught the fancy of central governments, local governments, as well as public and private companies. The other thing, of course, is as we stand right now, the basic statistics, India is, of course, the fourth most polluting nation and the second most populated country. And in this backdrop, considering that we're one of the fastest emerging markets, including China, the big challenge is to really accommodate a huge younger generation in a sustainable environment. Mr. Gurdeep Singh, considering that, you are looking at influencing the younger generation through your institution.
Well, I would say corporate decision making often happens at the board level, and that generation these days can be above 35 and often above 45. Our mission has been that if you want long-term sustainability and long-term effort in this area, it's good to catch people when they're young. So it is one of the important values which we wish to ingrain in all our students, because they'll be around for 35 to 40 years. And if they are bright students, they'll be managers and CEOs. So they'll have a lot of influence on corporates. So that is the place to start. And that's where we are working on.
You said that we are number 2 in terms of population and number 4 in terms of pollution. But we have to grow, and still our quality of life is not that high. So if we bring for every individual the same quality of life, there would be even more pollution. So that's where the clean tech comes in, where you grow but at the same time do not pollute so much. So we have to have very important play of the clean tech and sustainable development.
Right. Mr. Abraham, also, do you believe that green initiatives as well as sustainability is also becoming a business case? How tangible do you think these green activities are really turning out to be?
Shwani, I think it's a mix of a lot of things. There is an underlying cost argument. So some of these initiatives certainly help to, manage costs downwards. There are others which, it's a question of the engagement and the branding and the message you want to send out. And certainly there are some where fundamental business models are altering. And, from a bank's perspective, I think we are present in all three. There are certain initiatives which even today may not necessarily be economically viable in a very limited sense of the term. But there are things that we continue to do because we want to perpetuate this and do our bit to creating the scale that some of these technologies require eventually to become economically viable. So it's a mix of a cost argument. It's a mix of, what Chaitanya was saying, to get into new technologies and altering our consumption models. And it's certainly something which we feel enhances brand and engagement.
Right. ITC, of course, one of the biggest FMCG firms. You have a big hold on consumerism and the kind of mannerisms that people develop in terms of pushing them towards sustainable development. What are you looking at doing?
I think you need to look at it from the challenge perspective. And if you look at the Indian context, if you see the kind of, you have 800 million people below $2 a day, and you have resources for 17% of the world's population, which is just 4% of water and 1% of forestry. Now, obviously, whatever you do, whether we're in FMC or anything else, you're talking about it going further. You cannot grow with these kind of resources, nor can you grow with those kind of inequities that you have. So therefore, going forward, we certainly believe that companies need to adopt sustainable business practices. But do consumers treat you in a different way? No, not right now. We do hope in the future they would.
Right.
But initially at this point of time, certainly consumers can play a major role in getting companies to take the path to sustainable development in a larger way. For example, NDTV. Would you stay in our hotels because it is the greenest luxury chain in the world? Would you buy our paper because it is from renewable forestry? So that is when consumers will make a big choice.
So it's a mix of both. You position yourself as a green firm, but you also want consumers to actually adopt those sustainable methods, and that's something that we're working towards. Mr. Unnikrishnan, let me pose this question to you, because Thermax, of course, prides itself in providing solutions for energy and environment. What is your current assessment of corporates and what they're doing towards sustainable development? Do you think enough is being done right now?
We have 17.8% of the global population residing in 6 to 7% of the global land area, with approximately 7 to 8% of the all energy resources bestowed below our foot. So, India development model cannot be following the Western development model. We are going to be thinking sustainability and possibly reduction of footprint for everybody. I believe companies have to think for eco-sustainability, societal sustainability, rather than the balance sheet sustainability in the future. Those who possibly are working on balance sheet sustainability, they are in a fool's paradise, because they will not be able to sustain in the long term.
Right. Mr. Unnikrishnan, point taken, but of course, in a situation where we've got the economy slowing down, something that involves cost input will also need to make a business case for a lot of corporates. Let's also talk about those issues in a while from now, but talking about conserving the ecosystem, the point Mr. Unnikrishnan made, let me begin with what ITC does in terms of, integration of agriculture, wastewater management, and conserving the ecosystem.
Very right. I think ITC has pioneered a lot of work in rural kind of economies, primarily because of this whole issue of creating sustainable livelihoods. So eChopal, which is today the world's largest rural digital infrastructure, actually empowered farmers, first by bringing in bringing in ICT in terms of information technology to farmers. But the other mode was also to help them do sustainable agricultural practices. How do you grow with less water? How do you increase yields? Because food security is a big issue for the country. And you need agriculture extension services which can increase the purchasing power table for farmers. The other part was social forestry. We are in the paper business. And therefore, we very early decided to invest heavily into research on how to grow trees, because we had a fiber problem. That's why this part of the business was almost sick at one point of time. Today, by doing that kind of work and making those available to tribals in Andhra and various other places, you have 120,000 hectares of plantations, which today have given, and this is what Ernst & Young has also, because they audit our sustainability report, we've provided 52 million person days of employment. So you have a green cover of 120,000 hectares. You have employment for about 52 million days potential, and you've created a sustainable source of hardwood pulp for us. So this is the triple bottom line benchmarks that we follow in terms of creating economic, ecological, and societal capital.
Entire internal ecosystem or a cycle that we need to create here. But the other large input cost when it comes to making a business case as well is energy. We already have huge shortfall of that. Everyone's moving towards renewable energy, and that's where, of course, clean tech also comes in. So, Chaitanya, do you have a growing list of clients who are actually looking at clean technology, and how exactly are they diversifying into this?
Yeah, I mean, there are 2 points here. One is the notion which people have that clean tech or a sustainable development would cost more. Actually, it is not. And I'm saying that mid to long term, it is much more cheaper to, develop the organization in a sustainable way. Therefore, people should, or organization should select a better technology. It may be at times a little costly, but in long term they pay back, and they are much more eco-friendly, brand-wise, and also give value for money. On the second part, how it all will get implemented, and that's where we have, here Mr. Anand from a university and someone like me who has spent an entire career in this field. There are a lot more people who are interested doing this. They want to make it as a career. And today, this is one area I can say there is lack of expertise. Who can, come up and be a manager in a company and drive this entire sustainability agenda.
True.
I think it's going to really grow fast. Industries, including businesses, including government, they have come up recently with certain guidelines to industry to disclose on their sustainability parameters. So put together, it's a very conducive environment for industry to take on this journey with a faith that it is not going to cost more.
When we talk about renewable energy and the initiative that INDUSIN has also made, you of course launched a couple of ATMs that's been powered by solar power. How exactly does that work and how is it paying off for you? I
take Chaitanya's argument to some extent, but there is enough out there which you can do which makes an economic difference straight away. Certainly resource consumption, certainly in terms of, for example, the way IT functions, your green data centers, thin computing, those technologies, they alter models, working models somewhat, but contribute in a big way to, lower energy consumption. We've retrofitted all our cars to CNG. It pays off very quickly. Certainly solar is a different economic argument. In our, context, we find that solar has enabled us to make available the service in some of the rural areas far longer than it was possible in the past due to erratic power supply.
Right.
We've seen that solar has given an excellent branding. We've seen solar, as our contribution to perpetuating a technology which requires scale someday to make it viable.
If you look at renewable energy itself, I think a point that Chaitanya and Paul both have made. Initially, the investments could be high. For example, when ITC moved to get all its hotels at the LEED Platinum level and had to spend quite a lot of money to be there. But in the long run, for example, today 35% of energy in ITC is from renewable sources. 4 hotels at that super premium hotel at level are all running on wind energy today.
Okay.
And at some point of time, not only there would be economic benefits, but the point is every guest staying there, also it is ensured that his carbon footprint is one of the lowest because we also do other things together with it. So therefore, it does pay off in the long run. And the point is, it's not a choice anymore. I think all of us have to do this.
Right. We'll take a break on that note, but we'll be back with lots more. Stay with us. Welcome back. You're tuned in to the Green Boardroom, a special panel discussion here on NDTV Profit. Mr. Unnikrishnan, let me come across to you. If you can just run us through what Thermax has done so far in terms of creating a sustainable development and also to take the discussion forward as we've been discussing earlier. How do you really take it across to the consumer?
Since we are a resource-constrained country, how we manage the demand and have a better productivity for every resource that we take out. So Thermax had been promoting waste to energy path for almost 3 decades now. May it be a waste gas coming out of any furnace and converting that into usable energy, or resources like in a cement plant, the cement waste being recycled back as usable cement, multiple kinds of products. I don't believe in the theory that it is very expensive to go for waste reduction and maybe resource productivity improvement. In a 3 to 5 year period, any and every project which is of green nature pays back, barring solar and geothermal at this point of time, which is at incubative stage. So what we had been doing was creating many more platforms and portfolios of products which will reduce the carbon footprint of companies, which we had been steadfastly following. We are promoting solar in 2 ways. One is like the way ITC mentioned about, we are the people who are supplying them the solar concentrators, which supplies some steam for the laundry and the cooking in the hotels, and they can remove the usage of diesel, very expensive diesel from that. Second is a country like India will be needing solar energy to be utilized for creating cooling and air conditioning. Next area that we are creating solution is we have energy available below our foot in terms of geothermal energy. We are waiting and working with the government of India to have a policy created for extraction of the natural resource, which can be available in terms of heating, cooling, and also electricity generation.
The good thing is that we've already identified those opportunities and solutions, but Chaitanya, if you can provide us with some statistics or any sort of interaction that you've had with a couple of companies, are they open to taking on these development strategies?
Yeah, that's right. I mean, take example of solar. Solar Government of India under National Mission on Climate Change, they have come up with the solar policy. And the first round of bidding on the policy, the prices were much higher. And we have seen almost like 40 to 50% drop in the second round of the bidding for the solar projects. Now, which means that the cost of the technology, which otherwise we were thinking could be very high, because of the market forces, let me say, there is no much change in the technology, but people are becoming more innovative, more cost competitive. Today, the cost of the technology is also reducing. And that is true for many of the clean technologies. As and when we see the new technologies coming in, if there is a right kind of support from the government and from the industry, we find them becoming viable in a very short time. So I would say it's a combination of what industry is doing, like Mr. Unnikrishnan said. It's also about certain government policy, and we have seen government is very upbeat about it.
Do you believe the government is proactive enough, and do you believe corporates are also incentivized enough? You know, if we talk about green banking and green lending to particular sectors.
Yes, certainly. You know, from a regulatory perspective, there's a lot of stuff happening there. It's not necessarily that visible, right? So, for example, the Reserve Bank is very proactively promoting e-payments. The Reserve Bank, you know, is talking about getting rid of as much paper as possible. We are already into a, you know, check truncation project, which, I mean, at some point will also try and minimize movement of paper. So, you know, today we can do annual reports which are e. So there is a lot of that stuff happening. It requires altering behavior. It requires altering behavior at staff end internally. It requires altering behavior at consumer end. For example, today we are trying to encourage, through creating best-in-class products on internet banking or mobile banking, for customers to shift into an e-version rather than, you know, wallow in paper, because we are great specialists at paper in this country. So there is a lot of stuff happening out there which encourages the shift. I think it's just that it has to be, you know, put into formal constructs a little more proactively.
In terms of educational institutions, we've talked about our students and our people, but there is a community around, and obviously the number of students which will pass out is small. In Karjat, where we have our business school, we've engaged with 150 farmers. And we were engaged in an interesting debate. They said food will run out first. And our case was that water will run out first. And we talked about water wars, when people will actually fight. They're doing it between states and they're doing it between countries.
True.
So we said, rather than just talk about these issues and debate them, we worked with these 150 farmers to see how much water we can conserve. Now, there are a lot of mountains around Karjat. There are lots of beautiful waterfalls, but all that water flows away. So what we've done is first invested ourselves, not just in terms of putting money, but our students and the local community to come and build small check dams. So the fact that these check dams will slowly raise the water, some farmers are realizing they can do 2 crops.
With increasing purchasing power, you've seen a lot of consumerism, and it's also linked to a lot of waste. You know, how do you sort of bring down unsustainable patterns of consumerism?
The power that they can exercise as consumers, how do they make an enlightened choice in the first place? How would you know that this is where I should spend and this is what I should do about? So therefore, we've been talking about creating trust marks, which is based on a rating that, you know, people could do, like you have people who are experts in this line, can look at a company's performance in the economic, social, and the environment side, give you a rating, based on which you can put it in your products, which then consumers can actually go and say that, yes, this is a responsible company, I will buy. So these are responsible buying decisions, which tomorrow will not only help companies to take the path to sustainable development, but also there will be more awareness.
Okay, closing remarks. I'm afraid we're just running out of time. Mr. Unnikrishnan, to you in terms of, how much CEOs and business leaders at the levels that all our panelists stand at right now, how involved are all of you in inculcating these sustainable development models within corporate strategic planning? And do you have specific budgets, not just for corporate social responsibility, but sustainable development to protect the ecosystem, so to speak?
Most of the larger companies have taken a CSR on their own without having a stipulation from the government. Companies like us have already a social foundation, and a fixed percentage of our profit is already contributed towards this. And each of the companies would select a particular area of responsibility. I would say that somebody like us have taken education. So we're running slum children's school. I mean, I'm sure every company is doing it also. But something more elevated, Shivani, one should say is, CSR is not social service. That's a highly misunderstood notion. It is how, as a corporate, you are responsible to the society, society's sustenance. So ideally, your business strategy should be aligned. The product strategy should be aligned.
We've had the companies bill that has not been passed yet, but they were also looking at mandatory corporate social responsibility. Do you believe we need more guidelines to actually follow these initiatives?
If you look at outcomes only, and you're able to say that, yes, by embedding sustainability in your business strategy, and that is what ITC did, in fact, when Chairman Mr. Devesha took over 15 years back, it was a conscious decision to embed sustainability in our business strategy. And as a result, innovation came up to deliver all these three things together, the economic benefits, the ecological and the social benefits. However, it's not the question of guidelines. Certainly guidelines can support you, it can help you, and the government has done quite a lot of laudable work in that direction to even the national voluntary guidelines which has just come up. But the focus is not what you're just spending, but what are you doing with that spend? What is it leading to? And the moment we see outcomes and see what has it done for society, what has it done for environment, then certainly CSR becomes more meaningful, sustainability for a company becomes more meaningful, and it becomes part of your business strategy.
At the end of the day, senior management endorsement is absolutely essential. That gives the right signaling. But having said that, you can't risk it being seen as a fad of some individual up there in some boardroom, right? True. So education, awareness and empathy is essential, and you have to provide for that also, because then only then, and absolutely then will it permeate the system and then bring up the ideas.
These sort of statements we keep using, starting with Gandhiji saying that there is enough resources to meet the needs of the world, but not the greed of the world. And if you go by the statistics, by 2020, if we go on the path we are going, there will be 4 or 5 times more carbon thrown into the atmosphere. So it will not sustain the planet. And there is startling statements that events which were expected to happen once in 10 years, like a big flood, like Katrina, which cost America $6 billion, will now happen once every year. The crisis is here, and we've got to deal with it today.
Right. So on that very somber note, wrap up this panel discussion. Thank you very much, gentlemen, for being with us, and hope it's got a lot of corporates thinking as to whether they have incorporated sustainable development as part of their corporate strategic planning. Thanks very much for watching.